Welcome. Gridiron 360 on the mics. I'm Bill. There's Dave.
Hello.
Hola. ¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien.
Oh, yes. We're going to talk a little fantasy football today. We're going to keep with the theme that we did the last week and do a little recap by position group of Week 10 in the NFL as it pertains to season-long fantasy football. And then after we go through the position groups from Week 10, we'll take a quick little projection on Week 11. Some guys we're thinking highly of. Then we'll cut it up, get that up and out, and whether we piece it together with the daily fantasy or not, we're going to do that following this. So we give you a little of that. Not so great on that front from last week, but we continue to try to get better. But we'll get to that when we get to it. Sound good? Let's go. So Week 10 in the NFL as it pertains to season-long fantasy football.
Yes, sir.
Let's go with the running backs, my friend. Running back of the week, as far, well, again, this is all based on our point system, should be relatively the same for most, just depending on whether the only difference is standard and PPR. We are a PPR league. Point per reception, half point per carry. But for running backs this past week in our league, the top slot goes to Mr. Derrick Henry, who came in with 48.6 points, 23 attempts, 188 yards, 2 TDs, couple receptions. Really good day again from Derrick Henry.
Yep.
Right behind him comes Mr. Dalvin Cook with 44.3. Looks like he had about 97 yards on 26 carries and a TD. Also had 7 receptions for 86 yards. Nice. CMC, Christian McCaffrey, continuing to solidify himself as one of the top backs in the NFL. They took on Green Bay in a loss in snow, which ended up being kind of a pretty interesting game. That was he had 20 carries, 108 yards, a touchdown, 6 receptions, 33. Right behind him was the guy on the other side of the ball in that game, and Aaron Jones going 13 for 93, 3 TDs. Actually, number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one surprised me. I had him in a league and dumped him just because he hasn't done much, but showed up this week. Joe Mixon against the Ravens with 30 carries for 114, 2 receptions, 37. Didn't see the end zone. Melvin Gordon comes in behind that. So I think he's put together a couple weeks that have been pretty good for the Chargers, whether that's the right thing to do or not for that team with the contract issues with Eckler there, who also had a fairly decent game. He's further down on the list, that's for certain, but he had a fairly okay game. Let's see, Eckler went 6 carries for 19 yards, 2 receptions for 29. Not that great, but he did see the end zone, so that saved him. Some bigger names that typically fall, we expected more of, especially from a daily perspective, was Marlon Mack with the injury to T.Y. Hilton, the injury to Jacoby Brissett. A lot of people banged up on that team against a Miami Dolphin team that hasn't been that great. It was in Indianapolis. He really didn't do as great. 19 for 74 on the ground. 1 reception for 8 yards. Didn't see the end zone. Kind of surprised me. Guy that actually
In fairness to Marlon Mack, though, I mean, Brian Hoyer was a poop show in that game.
Yeah.
I believe he had 3 picks, if I remember correctly. He was not good.
Great.
It was the poor performance overall, and Miami's playing a little bit of inspired football.
They are. Above those guys who did come in, we have Josh Jacobs, had another pretty good day, 16 for 71 and 1 TD, 3 receptions for 30 yards. Nick Chubb went 20 for $116, 2 receptions for 5 yards. Didn't see the end zone. I find it curious because they did bring Kareem Hunt in this game, who got involved, but when they lined the two of them up in the backfield at the same time, Hunt was playing role of lead
block,
blocker
yep.
a lot, and that
Yep.
actually helped, I think, Chubb. And so how's that going to play out moving forward?
Yeah, mind you, though, he was very effective in the touches he did see. I mean, he was 4 for 30 yards and also caught 7 balls for 44 yards. So Kareem Hunt definitely has a piece in this offense. And the question will be, does it continue down this road and make Nick Chubb look better, or does it start to balance itself out a little bit where Kareem gets a few more touches? He definitely looked fresh, but he didn't look, he took a long layoff. He didn't look as poor as I thought he would look, coming in a new offense.
Yep. Some, the bigger name guys that really kind of were on the back end of this thing. Ezekiel Elliott really didn't do much. He had 20 carries for only 47 yards. That's 2.7. Had 2 receptions for 16 yards. Didn't see the end zone. Kamara, not a great outing. 4 carries only for 24 yards. 8 receptions for 15. And they were down. They lost, at home in New Orleans to the, not so great Atlanta Falcons. That is a rivalry game, so anything can happen. Down at 25 against a bad Jet team. Saquon Barkley could not get it going. 13 carries, 1 yard. 5 receptions for 30. Didn't see the end zone. They came out after that, said he wasn't 100%. That's not a recipe for success for the Giants. I don't know what's going on. Very embarrassed for my New York Giant team because all year long it was, you're talking about, last week we talked about the plane crash that were the Jets. Well, what does that make the Giants? Because we lost to them. A name that popped up, which is going to be a waiver wire potential add this week, out of nowhere really, is with the, Devontae Freeman looks like he's going to be out, and the mishmash in the Atlanta backfield is Brian Hill, who comes in with 20 carries, 61 yards, 1 catch, 10 yards, and touchdown. This is a guy that a lot of folks are going to look to add on the waiver wire just because he looks like he's going to get the lead back role there for whatever that's worth. We've talked multiple times this season about how Devonta Freeman just doesn't look right. This is a younger guy that, don't know a lot about him even personally. Got to be honest. So just maybe something to watch, but in the sense that, this team is, for the most part all season, been playing catch-up in every game they were in, yet they still go to the ground when they need to be throwing the ball. There might be some value in this guy, especially with the matchups that they have left on their schedule. This Ronald Jones kid for Arizona, he made top 10 numbers, 11 carries, 29
for
yards.
Tampa, Ronald Jones.
Yeah, I said he made top 10 numbers.
Yeah, but you said for Arizona.
Oh, sorry, against Arizona. I apologize.
Yep.
11 carries, 29 yards, and a TD. But what Ronald Jones when they drafted him from Southern Cal, one of the elements he was able to bring that they expected was his pass catching ability. It showed here. He had eight targets, 8 receptions, 77 yards. He did lose a fumble, but this is 2 weeks in a row that he's been fairly decent. Arizona, I don't know. I'm still a little curious about that backfield. It makes me a little nervous to hang my hat on that. But that's kind of, I'm rolling through just about the names in the top 25. Damian Williams for Kansas City had another week where, he is now kind of taking that lead back role from LaShawn McCoy. 19 carries, 77 yards, 5 targets, 5 receptions, 32 yards. He didn't see the end zone, and he lost the fumble, but he had an okay day.
And there is just something important is there is talk about that LaShawn McCoy may not be active barring an injury for the rest of the season. So it sounds like Kansas City is going to hand this role off to him for the long term. Now, what that means, we'll see.
Yep. So that's kind of – that runs down, Week 10's production.
Zeke had a rough performance too.
Yeah,
did you mention him? Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that.
I mentioned him because I have him. And it was, I took a big. You and I played this weekend, and I have a really good team, and that really good team didn't show up at all. They didn't help at all. And Nick Chubb was my lead back, and it was only with like a 20, 22, 24 spot. Zeke had like a 16 spot. Fournette was on a bye, so I had to sub in Tevin Coleman. He didn't really do much, and you took me to the woodshed. So, it's kind of things still kind of playing out like they have. They're kind of coming more into form. We're seeing now a lot of the same names in that top 25. I guess the question is those big names like a Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara are at the back end of the 25 rather the front end. And then you got some random names jumping into play like a Brian Hill and, even Melvin Gordon in his current status. And like I said, you got Ronald Jones jump in there, and it's been a little bit of a mixed bag this year.
Yep.
It's definitely, and from the DFS game that we play, I mean, it's definitely not been the predictions we kind of have thought, especially from a game script outlook.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, for all intents and purposes, that Marlon Mack. The game for Marlon Mack this past week, I thought was just money. I thought it would have been the money shot of the day, and it wasn't. I mean, it's not like he did horrible, but it certainly wasn't to the level what I thought. What do you say? You got any comments on them running backs?
I mean, I think you hit on all the key points there. I mean, there are certainly, I think we found the week-to-week running backs that you can rely on this year are definitely the top guys are McCaffrey and Cook are just they're tearing it up. And the good part is that where they're really living is their ability to, in their running game, is to offset it if they are not doing quite as well or maybe don't score a touchdown on the ground or getting it done through the air. So they're hitting you from both sides, which has really worked out well for the owners of those players this year.
All right. Well,
I got Dalvin.
Yes, you do. Let's go into the next position group from Week 10 wide receivers. You want to roll through it? You got it?
Yeah, I got it here. What it's interesting is, your top two names are kind of interesting.
Yep.
Christian Kirk on the daily side was a low buy, and he had a great game against Tampa. He had 10 targets, caught 6 balls for 138 yards and 3 scores, so the leading receiver. And another low-end guy on the DFS, and again, these two guys probably didn't get much play. In fact, one of them, this guy's not even owned in our league, is Darius Slayton for the Giants. He had a great game. He had 14 targets, 10 receptions for 121 yards and 2 scores. So kind of neat to see those guys down there.
Yep. I like Slayton as a Giants guy. I like him, and he's obviously got a little bit of rapport with Daniel Jones.
Yeah, and this next one is a name you've definitely heard in the past and is kind of starting to get into a groove. And it was interesting because his groove really started to get going with Matt Moore, but it's Tyreek Hill. He had 19 targets in this game. 19.
That's a ton.
And I mean, this is a little guy, and I know he's fast, but he got 11 receptions, 157 yards, and a score. So he lit it up. Another guy, Amari Cooper. I got him on my team, and what's amazing to me about him is I think the guy has been like questionable, and not like questionable like the Patriots questionable, but like a guy where you don't hear anything during the game the previous week, and then all of a sudden on Wednesday they're like, we don't know if he's going to play. I mean, this guy's had what? He had the thigh bruise, he had a knee, he had an ankle, and he had a foot problem, and yet he just plays, and he had 11 for 147 and a touchdown. So, I mean, and then the last guy in the top 5, as crappy as New Orleans played.
They only put 9 points on Atlanta.
Yeah. Michael Thomas, 14 targets, 13 of those caught. 152 yards. Unfortunately, didn't see the end zone, but he
catches everything that they throw.
This guy, I mean, you'd struggle to argue why he's not the best receiver in the game right now. I mean, just because his hands are like glue. I mean, and you've got some guys like Hopkins out there. He's had a little bit of a fall off in probably the last 4 to 5 games. He's gotten a little bit better as far as getting the touches, but his yards haven't been there. But beyond that, I mean, Michael Thomas is just other world right now. So, and he's been that way since last year. I mean, I had him on my team last year, and he just lit it up every game. So, and then outside of that, again, Cleveland putting a guy in here.
Well, and it wasn't Odell
Yeah,
Beckham,
it wasn't the
and
one we
talked
wanted.
a lot about,
We-
squeaky wheel gets the grease, and I've seen it in the past in New York and didn't expect anything less. When he starts to fuss, they start to look towards him. They even said it pregame. They're going to be looking to get Odell the ball.
Yep.
Unfortunately, he wasn't the guy.
Yep. Yeah. We had Jarvis Landry. He had 10 receptions or 10 targets for 9 receptions, 97 yards and a touchdown. Dallas, again, in a loss, puts 2 guys in the top 10 with Randall Cobb. He had 6 for 106 and a score. And then Golden Tate, again, Giants not looking very good, but again, they put 2 guys in the top 10 with Golden Tate for 4 receptions, 95 yards with 2 scores.
Well, I mean, part of the problem there is 13 carries, I think I said, for 1 yard for Saquon. That doesn't help balance it out.
That kill, especially when that's your best player.
Yep.
Some other guys on here. Good to see Devontae Adams get back into the groove. He had 7 catches for 118 yards,
Yep.
so that's his first kind of big burst since having the turf toe. Marquise Brown, this is one we heard, and we did play him. The idea being he was going to go over the top and get a big play. It was like the first.
He didn't score on that play.
No,
but
it
he
was
did go deep, and
yes,
then later he
his
scored.
first drive he got one, and then he got a score later in the game. So he was 4 for 80 and 1.
Only 4 targets, but caught all 4 for 80 yards, huh?
Yeah, some interesting ones. Kenny Golladay against Chicago. Again, good, tough defense to play against. Only had 3 receptions for 57 yards. Remember, real interesting was a late scratch on Matthew Stafford. It's got leagues investigating this because apparently he's got a broken bone in his back, I believe is what it is. So, Golladay, he did get in the end zone, though, so he had a good day there. Trying to look for some of the more bigger names.
You got Deebo Samuel, jumps into the mix this week. 11 targets, 8 receptions, 112. You have 2 of the Panthers receivers in the top 25, which seem to be consistent. It's not like it's great, but if you're, last week we had 6 teams on a bye, deeper leagues. If you need somebody, I mean, Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore have been in this top 25, it seems, for the past several weeks. Both of them getting some production. Moore this week, 11 targets, 9 receptions, 128 yards, didn't see the end zone. And Samuel, 8 targets, only 4 receptions for 35 yards, but did see the end zone.
Yeah, kind of the flip of how I mentioned the 2 Dallas receivers and the 2 Giants receivers being in the top 10 on losses. And a similar surprise, but in the opposite way, is Tampa wins against Arizona 30-27, but Chris Godwin and Mike Evans both kind of down on what we would expect in this game. Godwin was 6 for 74, no scores, and Evans was 4 for 82 and no scores. So you would have thought one of those boys at least would have had some big numbers there. These
the travesty of the week at wide receiver. The travesty of the week, which I dealt with. Who's that?
Oh yeah. Oh, he's not even going to be on here. He's not even going to be on here.
He is either. I'm going to put in his name just to see what he
I had to
with.
actually send a text to Bill as we're playing each other because I'm like, is Cooper Kupp hurt?
2 receptions for 4 yards.
He must have got those in the last minutes of the game.
He was not hurt, but he threw up nothing. I mean, it was not.
Which is not surprising that they lost this game because I think Goff is a mess. But even in his messy performances,
it wasn't that. I'm sorry, that was not correct. I
thought he had no catches.
4 targets, no catches.
Yeah,
I threw up a donut. This is a guy that has been one of the top receivers in the league. Yet Jared Goff can't seem to get the guy the ball once. I know you had talked a lot about Minka being on him, but I refuse to believe he doesn't get 1.
No. I mean, I again, it's a product, I think, of the quarterback. Interestingly, again, we talk about how Michael Thomas goes off and they only scored 9 points, yet Julio Jones in a 26-9 is the best receiver for Atlanta, and he's only 3 for 79. Calvin Ridley, 3 for 28. I mean, just some weird happenings when you look at what happened in the game.
Considering the score of the game, it's like, how are those guys not in it? Like, how are they not in these numbers?
Yeah, I'm trying to find Thielen. I don't even see Thielen on here. So
I don't know that he played. Did he?
Did he not play? Okay, so Diggs was only 3 for 49. Again, they won 28-24. Again, they got Dalvin Cook, and Dalvin Cook was the leading pass catcher.
And they got their tight ends involved in that game.
Yeah. So, Again, just some strange happenings. Just strange. I don't know any other way to say it. And not surprised by some of the guys we saw up top, but at the same time, how the game played out really didn't make a whole lot of sense to where some of these guys fell in this game. So the wide receivers was kind of all over the map.
It's all over the map for all of it. And look,
Yeah.
I don't want to proclaim myself as much experience as you and I have in as long as we've played fantasy football for 20 plus years seasonally, and from a daily fantasy perspective, I've been playing going on 4 years. You just getting into the game, but with plenty of knowledge. It really very, very difficult. We're not trying to steer people certainly in the wrong direction. If you listen to our evaluations, they are of sound mind in terms of us looking at game script, wide receiver, cornerback matchups, who's in, who's out, how that's going to affect the game, weather, what these guys have been doing in terms of their target share. And it's much harder, I think, than it's been in many years to predict what we think is going to happen, and for it to just, quite frankly, not even be close on some of them, just be way off. I mean, like, I can understand if it wasn't completely right, but you kind of saw where we were going with it. I mean, some of these are way off. I'll apologize if it's something you're hanging your hat on, but we're gonna pick ourselves off the mat and try to move forward with it.
Yeah,
So-
I'm not apologizing, but I will say this. Everybody and their mother, you listen to fantasy, the radio, Sirius,
Everybody's
wherever,
having tough time.
everybody was on, like, for example, New Orleans this week. While
Yep.
Michael Thomas did all right for us, nobody else on New Orleans
No.
did a lick.
No.
And
we
that game was
talked a lot
already
about
made.
Murray. We had him in our DFS lineup. I know Kamara was back, but Murray did nothing, and Kamara really didn't do anything.
No, and for that, really only Michael Thomas did something. Breeze had a poor game. I will tell you, I watched a good portion of this. The Atlanta defense, I don't know where they've been every other game, but this was the most inspired performance I've seen their defense play. God, going back to the Super Bowl year, it was unbelievable. The pressure they were getting is like, man, how do you do that to New Orleans? And you can't friggin' do that against scrub teams that you've played this year.
I don't know, man. I guess,
so-
look, they are professionals.
Yep.
And, I think they were coming off a bye, Atlanta, maybe, wasn't it? Going before this game? I thought so. But regardless, it just goes to show, and using the Falcon mantra, that any team can rise up. Any team can rise up and, put record aside, especially when it's a rivalry game, and get after it. And that's what I think you saw there. So good for them. Let's jump into the quarterbacks from Week 10. Mr. Lamar Jackson comes in at number 1 again. Has what did he do there? He had 7 rushing attempts for 65 yards and a TD, and yes, that one TD was video game spins running down the field.
Circle
Incredible.
button.
Threw the ball for 223 yards and 3 TDs. Right behind him in a loss, coming back to the field, is Pat Mahomes.
Welcome back, Mr. Mahomie.
446 yards, 3 TDs, but it wasn't a loss. Another guy to keep an eye on that comes in 3 moving forward, for the mere fact of my Giants are usually down in games, and this guy's got to, it's up to him to chuck it across the yard, especially when Saquon's getting 1 yard on 13 carries, is Daniel Jones. He's put together several weeks these past 3-4 weeks that have been very, maybe not great from an NFL perspective, but 308 yards, 4 TDs, had three carries for 20 yards, had a 2-point conversion, no picks, but did have a fumble again. Unfortunately, it was taken out of his
I was not
hands.
aware with this, and this is not as huge in fantasy, but it still matters. I believe he leads the league in fumbles.
Yes, he does.
So
Yes, he does.
that's a little bit of a
It's
you know
unnerving.
who had that problem. You probably wouldn't know this. You know who the quarterback that's fumbled the most in the NFL
This
is?
year?
In the
Oh.
NFL ever, career wise.
Favre?
Dave Craig. You remember that name?
Yeah, Seattle.
And he played for and the only reason I know that because he played for the Bears for 1 year, and that was when we had like 95 quarterbacks in 2.5 years. Apparently very small hands, like a circus carny.
Oh, okay.
So interesting. Daniel Jones doesn't fit the bill for small hands.
No,
so
he
I just
doesn't.
don't know what his Fumalaya problem is, but they got to work on that. Probably where he holds the ball, and how he holds
Yeah,
it.
I mean, it wasn't a fumble like he put it on the ground. Jamal Adams got around the back and
stripped.
literally
Knocked
took
it
it
off him.
right out of his hand.
That's right.
The ball didn't
Denver
even
hit
go
the
out.
ground. Yeah, he
It
ripped
hit
it
the
out of
ground.
his
He
hands.
just took it
Yep.
out of his hand and ran the other way for a touchdown.
So ball security a key, but certainly you can
Fantasy
see big fantasy
productions,
points though.
he's
Yeah,
putting it
he's
up
got
there.
four touchdowns.
Kyler Murray coming in at 1, 2, 3, 4, 324 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did have a pick. Also rushed the ball 3 times for 38 yards. He's continuing to produce week after week. I mean, you're starting to see that air raid offense really help him in the fantasy world. And then Dak comes in after that at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 397 yards, 3 TDs and a pick. You just spoke on Amari Cooper. We touched on how Zeke didn't have a great day, so
Yep.
it was all Dak in that game and a loss to Minnesota at home.
Yep, absolutely. Josh Allen comes in next. I mean, again, he's generally around high one, like a 175 to about 275 is probably his high end in passing, but does add the rushing element. And in this, even though his rush yards weren't huge, he had 2 scores on the ground. So he continues to rack them up.
Again, a conundrum for me, considering the Falcons won 26-9 in New Orleans, and we just kind of ran over the receiver numbers. I mean, Ryan was, let's see here, where is he? He had 182 yards. That's it.
Yep.
And had 2 touchdowns and a pick. So not great, but still in a win. Baker Mayfield, let's see, 238, 2 scores. Russ Wilson, he's a gamer, could be the MVP this year, but 232 yards, 1 TD, 1 pick, 6 carries for 53 yards. Modest day. Not the blow-up days
against the top 1 or 2 defenses in the NFL
Yep.
too. So that's a pretty solid day against the San Francisco D.
Yep. Down at number 23 is Aaron Rodgers. 233 yards, 1 pick, no TDs. Is that right?
No picks.
Oh, no picks, no TDs.
Which is interesting. What is interesting about that? Again, the weather was pretty bad up there, but not anything that an Aaron Rodgers hasn't put up big numbers. But what is interesting is coming off the heels of that loss. If I was a betting man, Aaron Jones had a very good day. But if I was a betting man, I would say if you're gonna need a resurgence, you're gonna put the ball in his hands, and they didn't. That's very un-Packers like.
Look, on the other side of the ball, Kyle Allen who comes in. Let's see, what do I say? Rodgers 23, 2, 1, 0, 9, 8, 17. 307 yards, 1 TD, 1 pick, 3 carries, 12 yards. But, outdid Rodgers from a fantasy production standpoint.
Yep, absolutely. Probably another one of interest because he's really kind of been up and down. And this probably plays more into the NFL side of things. But in a day where the San Francisco running game was not very good against Seattle, Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't get it done through the air. Only had 248, had 1 touchdown, but also had 1 pick in this game. I'm trying to remember. I thought he fumbled. Oh, 2 fumbles. Yeah, I thought he had more turnovers.
He had a 2-point conversion in the game, but he also had 2 fumbles, and one of them was later in the game that really allowed Seattle to jump back in this thing and push it to OT.
Yeah, and Jared Goff, who was generally thought of as a top 10 quarterback statistically, fantasy-wise, continues to struggle mightily. He's way down. He's below Hoyer through 3 picks. Jared Goff was 243, no scores, 2 picks, 1 rushing attempt for 0 yards, and a fumble loss. So he was responsible for 3 turnovers in their loss to Pittsburgh.
He falls in behind backup and
Taysom Hill.
Yeah, Taysom Hill for New Orleans, who's also kind of like that gimmick player they use, that utility player. I mean, the guy, he had 17 yards through the air, and then rush the ball once for 11 times. I mean, like, he also had one target for 3 yards. Not a phenomenal day by any means. I mean, 3.58. But again, this is a guy that's, if anything, you got Bridgewater behind Breeze, and then Hill comes in third fiddle, and Goff still lands his ass behind him.
Yeah, I mean, he gets listed as a quarterback, but I think the more amazing thing is we're talking about a guy that scored less than 4 points.
So did Bolake get in this game? Because Bortles, who now is with the Rams, got in the game. It was from a rushing perspective, but
well, look at his stat line. I mean, this is the problem with Goff is, and I saw an article that said who's worse, Trubisky or Goff, and while statistically you could argue it's definitely Trubisky, this is a guy that was in the Super Bowl, and this is a guy with a $137 million contract.
And a superstar head coach that is a offensive-minded guru.
Woo, this is ugly. I mean, this is a guy most people own. I don't know whether you're playing him now, but and the worst part is he gets to go up against the Bears defense next week. And if you remember last year, I think Goff had 5 picks against the Bears. There's at least 4. I think it was 5 picks.
Doesn't spell good.
I don't know if you want from a fantasy perspective if he's a play.
No. Real quick, let's touch on some tight ends. Do you have them up?
I do.
All right. Why don't you roll through some of those?
All right. Number 1, Mark Andrews from the Baltimore Ravens. They blew up the Bengals. He had 6 catches, 53 yards, and 2 scores. Behind him, good to see Kelsey got going again. He was 7 receptions for 75 yards and a score. This is one we debated about, especially on the DFS side, because I liked what Seattle had done with I keep wanting to say Jack Doyle, but that's not it. They're the tight end that got hurt. But I'm blanking, but I'll come with it in a minute. But anyway, he was his replacement, Hollister. 8 for 62. Disley, that's who I was thinking of, Disley. He was 8 for 62 and a score, this Hollister. So Seattle loves this tight end game. So definitely worth a look. Kyle Rudolph, who's been kind of, fallen by the wayside. Not huge stats from a receptions and a yard standpoint, only 4 for 14, but did bang in 2 scores. And then Greg Olsen, who keeps rising from the dead and then dying again. And then dying again, and then rising from the dead and dying again. He was 8 for 98, no scores there. So some of the producers, one that was kind of interesting to me, who's been surprisingly such a lost cause this year, and one of our favorites on Sirius talking about fantasy, liked O.J. Howard. And, I mean, he's just, again, talk about a guy that should be doing so much more in the NFL, but he did get in the end zone. He was 4 for 47 in his score, as we talked about that Tampa defense. Interestingly, some guys that we have, like Hunter Henry, didn't have one of his bigger games, as he's been targeted a lot lately. He was 4 for 30, but did get in the end zone. Austin Hooper was injured. He did score a touchdown before getting injured. I just saw something a couple hours ago. It says he's likely out for maybe even up to a month. So that's not a good sign for anybody that owns them.
Darren Waller, I have him.
Yeah.
Not such a great week again. He had 5 targets, 3 receptions, 40 yards. Didn't see the end zone against an L.A. Charger defense that I feel that he was primed to kind of throw up one of those big days again. But, I mean, he was a great surprise for about 6-7 weeks of the season. We're now at week 10. The past 3 weeks, it's kind of been single-digit points in fantasy for him.
Yep.
So, and there has been other weapons that have emerged in that offense. Obviously Josh Jacobs is getting it done and getting his from the backfield. Hunter Renfrow in the slot. You got Tyrell Williams. You got Zay Jones brought over. So you got Keelan Doskett. So there's other weapons there. And as much as we had liked Waller, and I still do, I mean, I have him on my team. It's hard not to ride with him. He needs to step up his production. Otherwise, I might have to look elsewhere.
Well, he's getting a look in that offense, and I think that's why you're seeing this. It's the Raiders responding to it. He's getting such attention right now, and now the other guys are exploiting it. Hopefully, they can continue to return the favor, and that'll open up Waller again. Another one that was kind of we took a run at him again last week. We felt like we had to kind of be careful and sacrifice a position in order because some of the prices were pretty high in DFS. But I thought just from a fantasy play, he might do all right. In fact, I even picked him up when Evan Ingram went down. Mike Gesicki. He started the game off with, I think his first catch was for 12 yards and proceeded to drop it on the ground. So he went 3 for 28, and that was there was limited options for that Miami team with all the injuries they had taken on. And so it just didn't pan out. Again, the tough part with a tight end, if you don't get scores, there's only a handful of guys that are going to get the amount of looks. One that was kind of interesting to me, who has not gotten a lot of looks and kind of going on your rough day with Cooper Kupp, was Everett. Everett got 12 looks, 8 receptions, 68 yards. He's been pretty much down more so than up this year, and it's kind of
had a couple games.
Yeah,
where
a couple where
he's
he's
I'm like, wow.
I'm interested. I mean, it makes sense with Kupp playing inside a lot that's where he'd take him from, but in the few games where Everett's been good, Kupp's still done well. So I don't know. That's kind of a strange setup that we got. So. Tight end, again, if you don't have one of the top 3 or 4 guys, and even those guys aren't always producing, in your example, like of Waller, who's a guy we expect to be up top. I mean, Mark Andrews and Kelsey right now are the hot hands, and I got to be honest with you, I'm liking Seattle tight ends, no matter who they are.
I tell you, this Hollister guy, woo.
Yeah, and with Luke Wilson out,
Wilson's out, and you got the other.
Disley went down.
Disley's gone for the year. This guy's stepping in, and they use the tight end. It doesn't really matter who it is, obviously.
Yep.
They're going to use him.
Yep. So that's kind of a recap of where we saw this year, this week go.
Yep.
Kind of interesting, some projections as we go through for next week. Do you want to look at some of those?
Yeah, let's jump back to the running back position group for this week.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what they, being these sites that we play on, we're on Yahoo, what they're projecting. And, by no means do I ever believe that projection to be true. More times than not, it's not what they say it is.
Yep.
But you do need to look at it with a grain of salt and understand where they're coming from. This week you have
I can say running back is one of the juicier positions I see.
At least we think it is.
Well,
we think
just from a matchup perspective, there's a lot of them, I guess, more the point. I mean, some of these guys are going to hit. I mean, you got your Christian McCaffreys and your Dalvin Cooks that are going to hit all the time, but, Christian McCaffrey's playing Atlanta. I mean, I didn't look at what he costs yet, but I know it's north of $10K on the DFS.
Yep.
Dalvin Cook, just because his versatility is probably as strong as anybody with the exception of McCaffrey. Ezekiel Elliott gets the horrid Detroit run defense.
Yeah, could be good for him this week.
Josh Jacobs against Cincinnati.
Oh, that could be really nice.
I like Melvin Gordon against KC, even though I'm not happy with what they did there. But, I mean, you saw how they got run on last week. So
yeah, I mean, a couple things. I think Fournette will be fine. He's going to Indy. He's done all right. They had a bye last week. Couple big questions I have, especially because I have one of these guys on my team, Nick Chubb. They're playing a Pittsburgh team, and not just a team, but a Pittsburgh defense that is really, really rising up.
Yep.
They've done very well in stopping the run. This is a Thursday night game, too. And, sometimes there's a bugaboo on the short week, slower game. How is Kareem Hunt's involvement going to come into play?
Yep.
Is it going to continue to benefit Chubb, or is it going to eat into his workload? Look, don't get it twisted. If you got Chubb, you're rolling him out there in season long. There's just no way you can't. But that, and then another scenario is what's going to happen here with New Orleans.
Yep.
Kamara has been ho-hum. I know he was banged up a bit, and Latavius Murray came in well to spell him. They're going against Tampa Bay, at Tampa Bay, who's been a good run defense. Their secondary is what's been porous. And to that note, they just let go of a first-round draft pick a couple years back out of Florida, Vernon Hargreaves. He's done.
Said he was too lazy.
Yep, said he was lazy. But, for the most part, I mean, Kamara there was the first game against Houston, he put up a 30 burger, and then the third game against Seattle, 45 spot. And ever since then, it's kind of been mid-20s and below. And to be honest with you, mid-20s isn't bad. But for a guy like Alvin Kamara and where you drafted him, that's not great.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So now I'm looking. The last time they met, and this was in New Orleans before he kind of was banged up a couple weeks into it. He went 16 carries, 62 yards. I don't have his receptions here, but it was he put up just under a 25 spot against Tampa Bay. So what's going to happen this week? And where does Latavius's role come into this game?
Yeah. This could be the game, though, where Kamara gets more looks because he can be versatile.
In my mind, here's the deal. Losing that game last week to Atlanta like they did at home, and us, there's still several weeks left in the season, but as this playoff picture starts to paint itself and who the contenders are and who the pretenders are and who has a shot at home first week bye, home field advantage, this is a very important game for New Orleans to get themselves back on track. And Sean Payton's a good coach. It's hard because the game script that we thought last week, that would have been a juicy game for the New Orleans skill players, which I still feel the same in this game. But it's still hard to know. I would think even though that the Tampa Bay rush defense is good, I think they're going to have to heavily involve Kamara and get him back on track, not just for this, but
the long
to
term.
Move forward the rest of the year, to see the guy that everyone
needed the explosive Kamara to
when you drafted
compete.
him, quite frankly, 2 or 3 overall.
Yeah, some other matchups that are kind of a little further down the list that are pretty nice. After San Francisco's poor running performance against Seattle, they get Arizona. I like a Tevin Coleman, maybe even a Matt Breida on a cheap. Those are guys that got a good matchup there. Maybe even a question, does Le'Veon Bell finally get going because they get Washington? He's not played well. Yeah, but he does say his knee is all right. James Conner against Cleveland. They need him back. You could see when they only really had one back to go to, it didn't work out too well. Jalen Samuel didn't have that great of a game. You got
my only question, jumping back to Le'Veon, is again, our Giants, what we're good on defense is in the middle. We were able to, if it weren't for the fact that he got in the end zone last week against us, he had 18 carries for 34 yards, man.
Right. Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, this is as ready-made as it's going to be to figure out whether Le'Veon's the guy for this team or not.
Sure. And I mean, the Redskins have allowed 406 yards after the catch to running backs this year.
Yep.
Total.
Yep.
So Le'Veon's a guy that can, though he only did 18 to 34 on the ground, he's a guy that'll catch the ball.
Yeah, I would say, James Conner against Cleveland's a pretty good look. Devin Singletary against Miami. Now, this is kind of the part I like about this with Miami. Normally people want to say, it's Miami and they stink, but I think Miami last week against Indianapolis opened the eyes of the better teams to be like, this ain't a walkover with them. So, I could see them needing to be more creative. Singletary gives them a little bit more elusiveness and also a pass-catching ability to help out Josh Allen in this game. So that one could be interesting. Gurley's got a garbage matchup against the Bears. They're not going to let him do very much, I don't think.
Here's a couple of names, and this is the game in my mind. This is the matchup of the week. Okay, this is the one when we get into DFS, I think we'll have some people heavily involved in, and that is the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans.
Yep.
Excited to see this game. Excited to see Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson go at it. They went at it in college. I was there. It was tremendous. A lot of fun. Both of them are gamers, and don't think for a second that both of these guys don't remember that and want to step to the forefront. But from a running back perspective in that game, could be interesting. Mark Ingram is very touchdown dependent, and I could, I don't think either defense is that great. Even though Houston's defense looked really good in London against Jacksonville, they do have a lot of injuries and a lot of holes, especially on the backside. And they're going to have to worry about Lamar, even though they've had an extra week to prepare. I think Ingrid could see the end zone. Do I think he'll have the yardage and the touches you want? I'm not sure. I actually think Carlos Hyde might really come into play this game because, look, man.
Mixon just put a C note on him.
And look, man, you got to, don't get it twisted. You don't want Lamar Jackson out there with the ball in his hands. You got to play keep away. And Deshaun can game with them, but with the defense for Houston being really, really banged up, they're going to have to get Hyde involved some way, somehow, a little more. And he's going to have to really produce. Now, will he get – I think he'll get the touches. Will he get the yardage? But I could see him seeing an end zone at least once, if not twice.
Yeah, that could be.
I really think that Carlos Hyde's involvement in this game, believe it or not, is going to be critical in Houston pulling out a victory.
Yeah, I think another one that could be an interesting matchup for running backs, and it's got risk associated with it, but is New England and Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing Sony Michel and Jordan Howard would be my two front runners there.
That's interesting.
But that's an interesting one. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. I'll be honest with you. It would be a tough one to play because I'm not sure where it would go.
From a season-long perspective, it is a question. I mean, is that a flex position you could put him in? I got to be honest. I've had Sony. He's done all right. I haven't really rode with him just when I've needed him.
Mm-hmm.
I did just drop him in one of my our league, I think. But again, I have Zeke, Chubb, and Fournette. And I needed the room, but, it could be one of those days where he has a great day. I mean, the Philly run defense is the better part of their defense, certainly, than their secondary. But, is very capable of seeing Sony Michel get going in this game. They're coming off of a bye week, I believe. Yes. But like you said, on the flip side, Jordan Howard, I think for the Eagles to have a shot in this game, Jordan Howard's got to be involved. The concern there is that's a backfield with a lot of players, and really in New England it's the same. It's a very similar situation. So you get a little concerned unless you have other guys in front that are definite starts. But that you can not have to worry about that situation and calling the game. You do have, if you have to look at some of these guys, you're just going to have to go through and really play game script on it. And it's tough to say. I mean, of all these teams in the NFL, New England and Philly are two backfields that are very similar where it can be a crapshoot. It can be a crapshoot. We talked about the pickup of this Brian Hill kid for Atlanta. They're playing Carolina, who's been, Carolina just got eaten alive by Aaron Jones, putting 3 touchdowns on him. Maybe not a ton of yards, but between him and Jamal Williams, they had some good yardage. They won the day that day because Aaron Rodgers wasn't really putting up huge stats. So what can this Brian Hill kid do? I mean, I'll be honest. It's like what do they have to lose, the Falcons? So they're gonna roll with it, and especially if Ryan is still not 100%, we'll see what this kid could potentially do. Again, deeper leagues, you need guys. Guys are hurt. Guys are on the. I don't even know who's on the bye this week. We'll have to look that up. But let's jump into wide receiver. I'll check the buys out. You look at wide receiver projections for this week and tell me what you think.
All right. So I think Tampa at New Orleans is going to offer a lot for the receiver side of things. You got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin on Tampa's side. You got Michael Thomas that just absolutely chews up footballs. But I got, the number one guy on this list that I use, but I got to believe he's number one anywhere, is Tyreek Hill. I mean, after 19 – first of all, he gets back probably one of the, if not the best passing quarterback in the NFL this year, just from a sheer arm talent standpoint. But looking at a guy 19 times in a game, I know other people are going to want to stop him. I don't know the Chargers got a guy that can stop him because you got to run with him. Mm-hmm. And the fact is the quarterback knows how to hit that guy in stride. DeAndre Hopkins against Baltimore. Remember, Baltimore's pass defense has gotten better, but it is still not strong. He is clearly a lead guy, but the good part is not only have they pushed Kenny Stills in, but Fuller's back. So it's going to create a little bit less attention for him. So I think that's a really good opportunity for them. Julio Jones against Carolina. Carolina's defense has not been as strong, and Julio, certainly has the ability to put up numbers. Amari Cooper, you got a guy like him, he just continues to perform. Detroit, again, if they're going to be going in there with Driscoll again, Dallas defense is pretty strong. So it might kind of get out of hand, especially if Zeke can run a lot. But Cooper just seems to get points. What I kind of like, I think this is a matchup which my feelings on New England is Edelman against Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he could go off in this game.
I do.
I like him a lot.
Now we're rolling through a lot of guys that are rostered.
Yeah.
You're going to roll out there. They're your ones. They're your twos. So let's tinker down to maybe some guys that you might have that might be on your bench or might be out there still to grab that could potentially produce for you.
Yeah, I mean, some interesting ones here. I don't know how far down we really want to go in some of this. I got to be honest, I like Jamison Crowder as a guy that kind of is on the edge. I like Mohamed Sanu. Those are guys probably down in your late 20s, 30 rankings. Crowder's just been catching the ball a lot. They're going up against Washington. They still need to figure out if they can get Darnold right. And again, Sanu, another guy that can kind of play that in the middle area with Edelman. They might snake some catches off each other. I think Marquise Brown, I think Baltimore's going to need some big plays in that game, to hang with Houston. Houston is probably one that can kind of go toe-to-toe with them in every aspect of their game. So I think Marquise Brown will be important in that game. He's generally he's rostered, but usually not in every week play. Deebo Samuel, another guy kind of saw it coming on for San Francisco. He looked pretty good, and I think he's got an opportunity to do well. Those are some of probably the guys that I see that have the matchups, but also kind of getting the groove of the offense a little bit more, that can make some big plays. Question will be kind of in Pittsburgh. What do they do as far as the passing game? We were really high on Deontay Thompson. And did I get that name right? I feel like I didn't get that name right. But Deontay Johnson, sorry. Going up against Cleveland, obviously Smith-Schuster is going to get, the tight looks. But, James Washington kind of came on a little bit. So interesting to see how that plays out. Those are some of your bigger ones that you're going to see. Beyond that, you're kind of looking through some of the matchups to see if you can find some guys that are down the list and maybe still available. It's kind of thin. Some guys, I'm trying to look here to see if I see anybody. I kind of, I like Hunter Renfrow. There was concern whether he was going to be consistent, and he's that underneath guy playing a little bit of that Edelman, Wes Welker type of role in that offense. He's gotten some looks lately, so he's another one that's got some potential there. As much as I was high on Christian Kirk last week, and unfortunately I didn't play him other than just one DFS game, but he went off. But I think this matchup against San Francisco, especially them coming off the loss, they're going to be hungry to get at it. So that's going to be a little bit of a tough matchup. So, kind of looking around, that's what I see going on with the wide receivers. You got, some Emmanuel Sanders, Galladay potentially, but, the quarterback situation's a problem. Could be John Brown for Miami, but again, it's just hard to capture consistency with some of those guys. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to look at quarterbacks next. Mahomes and Breeze are going to get some love in here, but to me, the fun part's going to be the shootout between Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's ability to kind of really put a lot on the ground, but then Deshaun Watson's ability just to throw touchdowns is going to be a lot of fun. I mean, the matchups with Breeze and Mahomes are very good for them from a passing standpoint. And clearly they want to, Kansas City wants to put the ball in Mahomes' hands. So those 4 quarterbacks are very, very solid plays. Kind of getting down below that, you got Dak Prescott. It's going to be a little bit tough. Detroit is a poor against the run, and if it could become an Ezekiel Elliott show, definitely could see him having a decent day, but how crazy he goes, I'm not really sure. Josh Allen's got a great matchup against Miami, and kind of looking for some of that balance and what they can do with that team. It could be kind of interesting as they play it out again. I kind of like Devin Singletary in this game. Could have Derek Carr against Cincinnati. My only thing is I would say Garoppolo against Arizona would be a nice matchup, but I have this feeling they're going to want to get that running game back going after that loss to Seattle. So, kind of looking through, Cousins, somewhat tough matchup against Denver, but may be able to, get a lot of drives going in this game. That could be kind of interesting. I already talked about how Goff is a mess.
Thielen, it looks like he may.
It looks like
back this
it looks
week,
like
right?
he's going to play, right?
Yep.
But that's again, Denver's a tough D. Kyle Allen against Atlanta might be a sneaky good play. Just he's pretty efficient, and while I think Atlanta's defense played phenomenal, the fact of the matter is in the previous games they've been terrible. So, I don't know how much I believe in that. Rivers, again, against a bad defense, it might be a good game on his part, but you kind of called it earlier, his throwing in games, he just looks like there's just not that zip on the ball, and his accuracy is starting to fade with it. So that's a little bit questionable. I haven't heard whether Brissett is going to be back this week. Have you heard that?
It looks like he is. He's expected to practice in full today. So we'll have to kind of follow that and see if he actually does. But if he does, it puts him on track to play this weekend, and they have Jacksonville at home. So it's a divisional game. It's important. They're still in the race for the AFC South. Indianapolis is.
Yep.
So they got to, especially with the Houston Texans taking on the Ravens, and if they quite possibly could lose that game, then, they're right back in the thick of things. Did you talk about Kyler?
Yeah. I didn't talk about Kyler. I'm a little off on, I think San Francisco is going to be out for blood.
I know, but look, 2 weeks ago these teams met. The guy had dropped just about a 30 burger on San Francisco's D. I mean, it's not he only had 241 through the year and 2 TDs, but I mean, this is a guy that that air raid attack, he's not running a ton, but he's running enough to give you those extra points. I mean, outside of surprisingly their win against the Giants and then a loss in week 7 and then a loss against New Orleans in week 8, I mean, before that, he dropped the 30 spot on Cincy. Then he dropped the 41 spot on Atlanta. Then he had those 2 games. Then he dropped almost a 30 spot on San Fran. Last week, a 34 spot on Tampa Bay. From a fantasy value perspective, he is definitely somebody, if you're a Goff owner and you're suffering.
Oh, yeah.
This is a guy that you could, or even anybody else, a Carson Wentz owner, a Matt Ryan owner. I know that Matt has, despite a lot of things, still been able to have some value in a fantasy world. Shoot, even a Tom Brady owner. I mean,
I gotta say,
a guy that can get you some points in the fantasy world.
Yeah, but I would say this: if you've got guys like that owned in your league, Kyler Murray is probably owned by somebody, if not you.
Probably. But depends. If you don't have as deep of a league. The announcement for Washington, Dwayne Haskins will start the rest of the year.
Did you find the buys on that one?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The buys this week I will run through. Week 11 buys: Green Bay Packers, New York Giants, Seattle Seahawks, Tennessee Titans. We got 4. Again, Packers. So Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, they're out of the picture. Giants, Saquon, Daniel Jones, Golden Tate, Slayton, they're out of the mix. Seattle, Russell Wilson, Chris Carson, Lockett, Metcalf, out of the mix. Tennessee, Derrick Henry, out of the mix. So they're off this week. Not as drastic, I think, as last week with the 6 teams on the bye. I think you could work it around. But, yeah, I mean, if you're a Saquon owner, despite his his lack of production the past few weeks, you're still rolling him out there. If you're a Derrick Henry owner, you got to find a replacement. He's been doing good. Packers and Seahawks, there's players there that you may or may not have to replace.
Yep. Could be an interesting one. We want to move on to the tight ends.
Yep. And then we'll wrap the seasonal.
Big, juicy matchups on the top end. You got Kelsey, Henry, Andrews. Those are guys that have been catching the ball. Henry and Kelsey are going against each other. That ought to be pretty interesting.
Sure.
Darren Waller.
Monday nighter.
Yep. Darren Waller. They could look to get him right against Cincinnati. That's a defense that can be had. Ertz against New England. Whether they can carry it on.
To come into play in this game. That's the thing. That's with Ertz this week. I think for them to have a shot, I think he's going to have to be involved.
Yeah, I think George Kittle's not as sexy of a play this week. One, because he's hurt.
Yep. But it is against Arizona, who is giving it up.
Yeah. So the question will be.
And it's 4:00 Sunday, so maybe he'll get it right by then.
Yep. Trying to look to see if there's any other big ones that I like.
Mark Andrews. I mean, the big thing for me, I know Andrews had a good week last week. I know he started off the year on fire, but what I've seen as of late from that team is Mark Andrews, Nick Boyle, and Hayden Hurst. They are rolling 3 tight end sets.
Yep.
So, not that he's not maybe the most prolific pass catcher of them, but it's going everywhere.
Yep.
So, you could see a week where it's not him and it's another one of the guys, and that, quite frankly, will tick you off. But if you have Andrews, more than likely you're rolling him out there.
Yeah, and another guy could be interesting this week, kind of a low end, maybe a DFS cheaper option, is Ryan Griffin for the Jets against Washington. The one thing about him is he seems to like him around the end zone, so that could be interesting too as well. But that's kind of further down the list, maybe not such a weekly play.
Yep. You look through some of these other names. Vance McDonald has been decent the past few weeks. It's a Thursday nighter against Cleveland. Yeah, I'm not sure. We talked about O.J. Howard from last week. I just can't buy into it. One of the things that concerns me more is when you were rolling through that, I think he was 4 for 8. Problem is when he is running routes, he's catching the ball at best about 50% of the time, and that's bothersome to me.
Yep.
I do, look, Greg Olsen against Atlanta, I can't go against it, man. I mean, the guys still play. In that game last week, Olsen came to play and was making some really good plays in a rough environment and some rough weather for that team to keep them involved in that game.
Yep, definitely. So that's kind of the rundown as we see. We're gonna go ahead and cut this one off here, kind of talking about the seasonal fantasy and the projections for this week, and then we're gonna go into our DFS lineups.
Ooh, all righty. We appreciate y'all listening. Thank you. We'll see you on the gridiron.